So today we're going to have some fun because there's a couple things that I usually say on day one. And one of them is, and I forgot to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway, which is a bold statement. I believe, and I hopefully you'll believe by the time you get through this class, this is a thought experiment because nobody's foolish enough to give me unlimited authority and power in an organization. But my thought experiment is I believe if I had unlimited authority and power in any organization, I would double their net profit in 2 years. The software development organization, that's what I do. Which is a bold statement, but I'm going to show you how I believe that to be possible. And I'll challenge you that when you get to the end, if you don't believe me, then, tell me where I'm wrong. It'll just be like being at home. That's what I always tell my teams. Tell me where I'm wrong. It's just like being at home. I have 3 boys and a wife and in-laws. So I'm corrected quite frequently. This is one of those things. This is day 2. Why are we doing this on day 2? Well, because I give a shorter version of this class called Doing the Right Things Right. So I'm going to give you, again, mental models, different ways of looking at the world. Being successful is not that difficult, theoretically. All you need to do is you need to do the right things right. So there's 2 things in there, right? There's choosing what to do, which is doing the right things. And then there is the process, or how do you do those things right? Or I would even say, do the optimal things optimally. Write that down. It's really good. That's better. I can put that on my tombstone. I like that. Doing the optimal things optimally. And that's what we want to do. And you're going to find out as we go through, the class, and specifically when we get into Principles of Product Development Flow by Reinertsen, we're going to talk about how important it is to do the right things and identify what are the right things to do. And we don't do a great job of that, at least in the organizations I end up being an agile coach. And maybe there's a reason for it, right? I mean, if you're a psychologist, you tend to see people who are mentally ill. If you're an agile coach, maybe you see people who aren't good at agile. Maybe the rest of the world is doing this stuff and I have no idea. But my guess is that they're not. Agile is about sequence. That's one of the things that we need to change from the waterfall mentality. It's so much about when we do things. In fact, our good friend Dan Pink, who has the book Drive that's on the syllabus, he wrote another book, and somebody mentioned it in the chat, called When, is one of his new books. When we do things is really important. And when we do things in Agile is really important. So the sequence of the backlog. So if you remember on day 1, on Tuesday, we talked about people have ideas and then they go into the product backlog, and then it's up to the product owner and the team to refine that work and sequence it properly so that we can deliver the most value over the shortest amount of time. That's really what Agile is about. How can we deliver the most value over the shortest amount of time? So hopefully with that as an introduction, I'm going to show you a real easy way to get there. And this could be used in anything in your life, not just software development or Agile or your work. This can be used in your personal life, and people do it, right? It's called relative estimation and predictability. I'm going to start with a pretty simple premise. Before I get started on that, how many people? I know we've got some people. It's interesting. We've got people who've probably never heard of Agile and Scrum, but that said, "Hey, I'm going to give this a shot. See what this guy's got to talk about." And then we got people, I've got coaches who've probably been doing this for years. So it's a pretty interesting group, a mix of people. How many people are familiar with the concept of story points? Raise your hand. Yeah, I see quite a few. Okay, story points, it should be what we call relative estimation. And I'm going to talk about that today. So the biggest thing about story points, for those of you who are familiar with it, is it's really a lot of times, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's okay. You can take a mental nap for a while and get refreshed. We use them really poorly. We use estimations really poorly. And we've this concept of story points, which is relative effort, we've done it very poorly. There's a lot of pain and confusion over this thing that we call story points, which is an estimation of relative effort. How long will it take me to do something? And the reason being is there's a difference between a relative estimation and an absolute estimation. And we're going to talk about that difference, right? Hours, days, months, That's not relative. That's absolute. And that's what people are looking for, unfortunately, because we've lulled people into this false sense of security. Maybe it's just a human tick that we have in our brains, that we can, in the complex world, know how things are going to work out. I want to disabuse you of that notion. In the complex world, we can't know ahead of time how things are going to work out. So all we have is a plan, and it's the planning that's important. I think we talked about that last time. Points have been so misused by people in Agile and Scrum, and you don't see story points in the Agile Manifesto, nor do you see it in the Scrum Guide. Okay, so it's not a feature of Agile and Scrum, but we got to talk about it because I want to talk about sequencing. There's a whole movement called No Estimates movement. So for all you folks who are on Twitter, it's hashtag No Estimates. You can find it. I got off of Twitter a while back. It gets a little bit too bizarre and insular and political for me. But there is one. It's called No Estimates. And there's people, I don't think that's the right thing to do. Just because it's almost like the gun argument. Just because a gun can kill somebody, I'm assuming it could be useful for something. It doesn't have to kill somebody. Same with points. They don't have to be evil, but they've been misused so much that people say, let's just get rid of all of it. I don't think that's the right thing. I think we need to understand how much it's going to cost me to do something, or how much it's going to take me in terms of time to finish something, to deliver value. So throwing them out the window, I don't think is the right thing to do. And there's probably people in the No Estimates movement say, Larry, it's not that. Okay, I get it. But we have to, and I'll prove it to you. Let me pick a willing accomplice. Rob, you're going to be my willing accomplice. You've been through this before, but it's been a while since I've seen you, so I just wanted to say hi. Good to see you. Most of you have cars, right? You have automobiles? Yes? So every once in a while they break down, right? You have to take it to a mechanic, right? Rob, when you take your car to the mechanic, you're going to ask that mechanic 2 questions. You see now I have this superpower that I can read minds. You're going to ask that mechanic 2 questions. What 2 questions are you going to ask that mechanic?
How long is it going to take, and how much is it going to cost?
Yeah. And why are you going to ask those 2 very simple questions, Rob?
Because I want to know the answers.
You want to know the answers. And the reason you want to know the answers is you've got to be able to plan. How long am I going to be without an automobile? Do I need to rent another automobile? How much is it going to cost me? Do I have to do without food today? Do I have to move some money from my retirement plan? Right? Something like that. Hopefully not, but you get what I'm saying. Everyone asks the same 2 questions. Sometimes there's the 3rd question, what's wrong? That's for the engineers in the group. They always want to know what's wrong with things. Everybody's going to ask the same question. I don't think it's unreasonable for our business partners, right? And I mean partners. We shouldn't be like this. We should be working together. For the people who are representing the business side, representing the customers, representing how we make money and deliver value to our customers, I don't think it's strange for them to ask, how long is it going to take you? How much is it going to cost me? Right? And that's what a relative estimate on effort will give us. So I don't think we can stop asking the question. I think we got to get better at answering the question. I'm going to show you how to get better today. Everything's relative, by the way, except for one thing. Everybody know what the universal constant is? It's C. C is for cookie, but in this case, C is for the speed of sound. Einstein tells us that E equals MC squared. And no, C is not for cookie, Jim? You're shaking your head.
It's not for speed of sound, speed of light.
Oh, speed of light. Yeah, sorry. I said it wrong. Speed of light. It is also for C is for cookie.
Emily caught it.
The old song. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so everything is relative. So too are things like value and effort. That's what I'm getting at here. But when we start using hours and days and months and weeks and blah, 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 that's absolute. We got to stop doing that, because all it does, especially when I'm working with developers, I have any software developers out there? Raise your hand. I know I do. I ask you for an estimate. Do you want to give me an estimate? No. Why? Because it's like I'm giving you some rope and I'm saying, make a noose for yourself. Because that's how you're going to hang yourself. because they're going to take there's the old meme, they're going to take your estimates and they're going to treat them as absolute fact. So you don't want to do it. You hate giving estimates because it's always been painful to you. And that's because people are asking for absolutes, and we can't do that in a complex world. We need relative stuff, okay? It's not that we won't use hours. We'll talk about how we might leverage hours, but if we're gonna use hourly estimates, we're only gonna do it for things that are more finite and easier to figure out when we know more about them. So speed is important too, by the way, because everybody looks at this thing that we're doing with relative sizing and effort, and they're saying to themselves, oh, this is telling me when I'm going to get something, and I'm going to use it for predictability. It's not just for that, by the way. It's feedback. Remember, in the complex world, we need feedback. It's feedback to the business on what it's going to cost, especially in the world of software development or knowledge work, which is very human intensive, right? It's not materials intensive. It's human intensive. It really talks to us about the cost. And they want to know that feedback as quickly as possible because it allows them to make a decision on the sequence of the work. Should we do this now or should we wait? Because that's the real answer that we have. Because if you're not doing the right thing now, there's an opportunity cost that's really, really high, as well as the cost of delay, which we'll talk about later. So this is fun. We're going to have fun today. You said, Larry, you promised fun. It's not fun yet. All you've been doing is blah, 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 and the whole time. It's fun. I've done this so many times, and every time I do it, I still have fun. We used to do this with co-located teams, do it on a whiteboard with tape and pieces of paper. Now we'll do it virtually. We're using a tool called Mural. So here's the deal. I need a group of volunteers. I need 5 people. Raise your hand in the reactions if you know about home improvement, because we're going to work on a home improvement backlog today. So I need 5 volunteers who know something about home improvement. Jim and Edward, can you help me with my volunteers? It looks like Ben has got his thumb up. We'll take that as 1. Ben knows home improvements.
We have Nicole.
Nicole's got her hand up.
Nicole, we've got Mary Ann. That's 3. Give me one more. Nicole, Ben, Mary Ann, and Larry. The rest of you I didn't see, so I apologize if I didn't get to you.
We have Stefano.
Stefano, we'll make it 5. Stefano,
Yeah, you usually use 5.
5's good. 5's good, but I think I only have 4 piles, but it doesn't matter. You all know what a honey-do list is? That's where your honey says do this and do that, right? So this is a real honey-do list. It's not DEW. A honey-do list, DEW, would be a list of succulent melons, but it's not. It's a honey-do list, DO. Honey do this, honey do that, right? What we're going to do is we're going to do this relative sizing thing. We're going to do it in some steps, but I'm not going to go over these steps. They're in the slides. You're going to see it real time. This is just, if you want to look back at it, you can go through it. Those are the things that we're going to do. Here's what I need to do is I need to stop sharing this and I need to start sharing something else. So this is Mural. Say hello to Mural. I'm going to share this with the group, but only my 5 people that we identified if you want to grab it, and the rest of you just sit tight and watch my screen. So my 5 volunteers, oh, I did have 5, Jim. You remembered and I forgot. My 5 volunteers, please click on that link and enter the mural. I see that they're starting to. See, look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect.
Nobody else click on the link, please.
Nobody else click on my link, but my volunteers, please. Okay, great. You guys are doing really well. This is good. When you get to work with smart people, it's really good. People who can follow instructions. Here's what we're going to do. Here are all the home improvements. They're on little sticky notes. Don't do anything yet, else I'm going to kick you out. Promise I will. What we're going to do is we're going to ask a very simple question. If I were to do this thing or do this other thing, which is going to take me longer? Which involves more effort? You with me? It's real simple. And this is relative. It's actually much, much easier. It works at a whole different part of our brain. There's a whole different part of our brain that understands relativity, and it's much, much quicker to do this, much, much easier. So I'm going to grab two at random. The visiting shark, you're making me nauseous over here. You keep moving around. I'm going to grab two things at random. One I can't see. Okay, one is remove the wallpaper and repaint the bathroom. And I wrote it kind of as a story, which is kind of silly. As a user of the bathroom, I want to look at the walls with new wallpaper because the walls look awful. And the other one is replacement windows in the Arizona room. An Arizona room is like a covered porch in Arizona. In Florida, I think they call them a Florida room. Do we call them California room? Do we have California? I don't know. Okay, so I'm going to ask a very simple question of my team, and my team are the experts. So when we're talking about the team that I'm asking the question to, I'm asking it of my developers. So I got 5 people. We're going to consider them, quote unquote, my developers, and we're going to do this in a pseudo Scrum team. So I'm just going to ask outright, and Stefano, you're at the top left of my screen. Which one of these is more effort? Wallpaper or replacement windows?
And this is assuming that you were physically doing the work yourself.
It could be, yeah.
Or hiring somebody.
Let's assume that for now.
If you're doing them yourself, then the windows would take longer.
Right, and that was pretty easy for you to figure that out. Right? So I'm going to give them some space. Left is less effort, right is more effort. So now, if I grab, I used to say like a magician, pick a card, any card. But these aren't cards, these are something else. I can grab anyone. So here's one. Let's quit moving them around, people. You'll get your chance. I'm going to see what I can see. I'm looking over here. Rewire the Arizona room. I'm going to rewire and do electricity in the Arizona room. It's got 5 places it could be theoretically. It's either less than this one, same, in between, about the same as this one or more. Who else is on my squad? Marianne, you're on my squad. Where does this belong on the list? In between, about the same, over to the right. Can you see? Marianne, you're muted. We have some technical difficulties. Let me, Marianne, I'm going to
No, that's okay. This is the first time I've used this, so.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
rewire,
yeah.
is it bigger than replacement windows? Same, in between? Where does this belong?
Well, I'd say it came after. You're making me dizzy too. Remove the enemies of window. Well, it seems like the wallpaper and repaint. Oh, that's the bathroom, the Arizona room, and then the last one, replacement windows. If you could only do one thing at a time, I guess decide what the most important thing is. The rewiring of the room is separate from the wallpaper.
Which one takes the most effort?
Well, you need to rewire. You probably need an expert to do that. And you can do your own wallpaper work. And the windows, well, part of it is like, okay, you're going to have to get experts to do some
Marianne,
of this, right?
I'm going to slow you down. You're overthinking it.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I want this. You're doing what all my developers do when they first do it. And that's okay. And
all right, so
it's good.
Most effort, I say, rewire the Arizona room.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Yep. Good enough. As I say, good enough for government work. Right? This is very good though, and I appreciate that, Marianne. And Marianne, I'm not coming down on you. This is what everyone does.
No, I see what you're saying. You got to just get it out there, and then you can talk about it.
Just like this.
Yeah.
Because
okay.
what you're doing is you're trying to come up with all kinds of things, and that's what people do. Because you're trying to be 100% correct. I don't want you to be 100% correct. I want you to go deep into that primordial ooze of your brain that says this one's bigger and this one's smaller. That's it.
Okay.
Right?
Gotcha.
So, all right. You get the idea, by the way. You're all smart people. You probably saw this before I even started this. All we're going to do is from left to right, the smallest to the largest. What I want to do first is I want to do it quickly, and I want to get the things out there, because what's going to happen is you're going to get at least 80%, Pareto principle, 80-20 rule. You're going to get at least 80% probably right on the first go. You're not going to have to spend a lot of time thinking about it, right? You with me? So you all have access to do this. All you can do is click on it and move it. So since there's 5 of you, there were 5 piles. Somebody's creating new stuff. We're going to get rid of that. Somebody's playing with the tool. Let's start. Stefano, take the top one. Marianne, take the second one. Ben,
Okay.
take the next one. Who else do I have? I forgot. Who's going to take the 4th one? Larry, take the 4th one, and whoever my last one is, take the 5th one. Now move them in the order that you see. Some are going to be like others, some are not. You've got the whole board and then some to work on it. You already are moving it. You're getting it, right? You folks are seeing what's happening. I call this part, it's called, there was a name for it. I thought, one of the things is I thought I invented it, but like all things, I didn't invent it. It existed before. It's called silent grouping and an affinity estimation. This is the silent grouping part. I want you to notice how quickly they can do this. For those of you familiar with the concept of points, I've seen software developers in a room almost pull out knives and shank themselves. We say that word shank, and threaten each other because they are arguing whether something's a 3 or a 5, and they spend an hour trying to figure out whether it's a 3 or a 5. That's what developers do. They're wonderful people and I love them, but they tend to be a little bit too analytical at times. I want you to, again, quickly put things in the order that they should be put in.
Larry, could you draw like some boundaries or something? Like
Nope.
5 little categories or something?
Nope, not yet.
No,
Nope,
okay.
not yet. No.
Just because I move something and then something else gets moved around it, so it's all good.
Yeah, well, that's all right. Just keep working. You guys keep working, and usually you shouldn't be moving somebody else's stuff. Is the rule, right? So don't be moving other people's stuff. You got enough on your own plate. Worry about yourself, kids. There'll be plenty of time to move other people's stuff later. We're almost done. And you can see that some people are changing colors on things. You guys are just. But you can see how easy this is. That's what I want to impress you with. This is so much easier. We're almost done. Does anybody still have more to place? Okay, I think we're done. I can't read them because it's an eye chart for me way over here. Monitor's way over here on this side. I want to keep you guys in the front so I can see you. So how long did that take us? We got about 30 something stories, 30 items. What, 4 or 5 minutes?
Right.
If that. So this is the first couple rounds in the slides. That's why I don't show the rounds. It's just, I've done this so much, it's just fairly intuitive. What we want to do now is basically we have the effort. We're going to start actually trying to put these in columns, which is what Stefano was asking for. Because I didn't want to start thinking in groups yet. I wanted you just to have this kind of free form ability to move things where you think they belong. Here's the thing I'm going to look for though. For those of you familiar with how we do story pointing or relative effort estimation, we generally use something called a modified Fibonacci sequence. So some people are familiar with that. And I know my friends are going to put this in the chat. The modified Fibonacci sequence goes 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 20, 40, 100. These are different relative sizes. Why they use a Fibonacci sequence, somebody else will put in the chat as well. It has to do with things being significantly different from the preceding, from what precedes it, right? So that we have delimited columns. If you count those, there are 9 columns. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to figure out, do I have 9 columns? Now I have more than 9 columns, actually. I can zoom out to see them all. I have, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I got about 18 columns. So if I'm going to try to collapse these into 9, I would start asking some questions. I'd start drawing some stuff. Like this one is in the middle of the 2. And what I would ask, since I'm going to try to start collapsing some columns, since this kind of is, oops, I got the hand. I got to get rid of the hand. Since this one is in the middle, is it closer to this area or this area? And then I'll ask the team, and the team's going to say it's closer to this, and I'm going to move it. And this one seems to be in the middle, but is it closer to this or this? And then I'm going to move it. And this one's in the middle, so these go. We're going to put these here. These two. This one's kind of in the middle. Is better here? Here. I'm going to ask. We're going to work this through. I'm not doing with you guys because I want to get to the meat of the presentation. These kind of go together. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for affinity. What groups look more like the other group, right? It's an eye test. You know, when you go into the eye test, is it clearer here or here? Does it look better here or here? So I'm moving these things around and seeing what it gives me. Now I've got a little bit more identifiable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm not as concerned about the stuff on the right-hand side. I would probably ask the question, since I'm going to try to smush it into, here's one that's on its own. Does it really belong on its own, or should it move into another column? If you say it belongs on its own, I'm going to look for another one. This one's on its own. Is it okay if I move it over here like this? Now I've got my 9 columns. I could have fewer. I never know how many I'm going to have before this starts. But what I'm going to get to is I'm going to ask the question as we're doing this, and I might do this first, or I might do the next step first. It doesn't really matter because we're going to get to the same thing. Does this in this group look more like the things in this group, or does it look like something in another group? So now I've got my 9 groups. Now I might ask the question of my team. I could draw, obviously. I think there's a pen here, so I could do this. It's not as easy as it looks. I might do this so that people know where the boundaries are. It's kind of fun. So now that I have that, I have my 9 columns. I might ask a question from people. Hey, is there anything in the wrong place? Right? I know I'm looking at my team members and I see they're shaking their head. Oh, I think there's something in the wrong place. But we're not going to do that. You're not going to move them yourself. So what I might ask the next question is if there's something, if you see something out of place, something that's in the wrong column, you can't move it yourself, but you need to convince either the team, since we're all online, that it's in the wrong place, or you need to convince another person if we were in a group. So you have to convince at least one other person. If you can convince another person it's in the wrong place, go ahead and move it. So I'm going to ask Ben. Ben, do you see something in the wrong place? Pick something. Doesn't matter what.
The doggy door, the pantry, and the gutters don't seem to be congruent, so one of them needs to move somewhere.
Okay, so give me one of the things that you think needs to move somewhere.
So I think organize the pantry, stick that into the laminate and floor in the kitchen because they're both in the kitchen, so that could go together.
Right, and so what I would ask the question is, everybody in the team seems that is that a reasonable thing? We go ahead and move it, whether or not. I'm just assuming you agree. I got somebody shaking their head, but it's okay. I want you to stick with the bigger picture here. You guys are not going to do work on my house just because I made you volunteer. So let's stick with the big picture. So after we do that, we're going to take some time and we're going to make sure that we got things in the right place. And everybody's in general agreement about it. And then really what I'm looking at is now I've got this. This is really hard with the mouse. But I'm going to keep doing it anyway. So you feel my pain. I feel like a 2-year-old drawing. I've got my 9 columns and I've got some numbers on them. I'm going to ask one more time, does anything look out of place to you? But now that I put numbers on, why do I want to wait to put the numbers on? It's because as soon as I put numbers on something, you start operating a completely different part of your brain. You start operating with the place that uses numbers, which is the prefrontal cortex, and that's really slow. That's why we did everything at a different point. I always say when my birthday's coming up, of course, you all missed my birthday. It came and went. It's okay. Some of you didn't know. With Christmas, I want an MRI machine so we can test this. But I'm guessing it's using a completely different part of your brain. So I don't want to get to the numbers right away. You with me? I want to get to the groups. So now that I have the numbers, these are effort numbers and they're relative in size. And we'll go through one more exercise to say, are these things in the right place again? And we'll do the same thing. Do I need to move something? And you might say, gosh, 100 is really big, which it is. And you might say, I don't think I have anything that's 100. I'm going to move these in here. Okay. It works for me. I'm good with it. You with me? Until we get something that we're all comfortable with. These become the yardsticks by which we are going to measure the future work, because if I had something new, somebody was trying to put something new, all I have to ask a question is, no, I don't ask what's the number. I ask what's the group, right? So let's say I want to, wash the car. Pretty simple. Which group of things does it look most like? Well, it looks like the things in the one group. Okay, that's a one. You see how easy it is? And so this way we can, and this is something that I don't know, for those of you who are doing Scrum or have heard of Scrum or have done this before, this is something that's really important for me. You should get feedback on the relative effort of all the items on your backlog as soon as possible. Because if I do not know how much it's going to cost me to do something, how do I know whether I want to do it next?
Hey, Larry, I've got a question on to clarify here. So the affinity that you're talking about is strictly, the horizontal axis is strictly effort.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yep.
So just because something looks like something else, when you're saying that, it's the affinity is strictly on effort,
This is
whether that be
strictly on effort.
hours or time or whatever it may be.
This is just on effort. This is relative effort.
Thank you.
It translates loosely into time and cost. It also helps us translate into something called cost of delay, which is what we're going to compute later. But I'm not going to get too much into that because we'll save something for later, right? So I'm done. I'm basically done with this, right? And you all get how easy it was. And the reason this becomes important is I want you to now step back and ask yourself a question. If everything is relative and I can do this with effort, I can do this too with value. Same group of stories, different audience. So my product owner gets some people together from the business maybe, or the product owner, sometimes I do it just with the product owner because the product owner feels that they know it well enough. And I'm going to ask a different question. Instead of asking how much effort would it take, I'm going to ask the question, if I delivered this piece of work today versus this piece of work today, which one brings more value? Really simple question. So what we end up with is you end up doing the same exercise, but asking a different question about value. Now I have the two things I need to really understand which are the most valuable things I can do in the shortest amount of time. And I can start to calculate a value to effort ratio. And the higher the ratio, the sooner I should do it, theoretically. And that's going to help me sequence the work. Right? You with me? I'm going to stop sharing this. I just want you to get this because I get this question every time. So I want you to listen very carefully if you haven't been yet. You're going to do it effort with the people who do the work, just like we did here. And then you're going to take that same group of work with people who know the value, which is usually business people, and you're going to ask a different question. You're going to ask, if I delivered this today versus this, which one gives more value? And I want to answer it that way because really what I'm going to compute in the end is cost of delay. Okay, so I stopped sharing that. I want to get back to my thing. So there's some steps in there. You can look at it later. What we're trying to do is we're trying to do a sequencing method. Everybody's familiar with sequencing, right? You don't know, you may not know that. I think most people are familiar with something called FIFO, first in, first out. FIFO is something we use in manufacturing because if I have this widget and this widget, they're the same exact widget, right? And that's the purpose of manufacturing, is to make everything the same. That's the complicated world, right? So it doesn't matter whether I do this widget now or this widget now. The difference with knowledge work, the difference with complex work, the difference with software development, in my case, is that you have some pieces of work that have a high value and you have other pieces of work that have less value. And you have some pieces of work that take a lot of time and effort and you have some pieces of work that don't. And I want to take advantage of that asymmetry. I want to take advantage of the fact that they are different. I'm just looking through the bullet points, make sure I didn't miss anything. We use this for value as well as effort. And now we have effort and value, and that ratio gives us a basic real quick way to get an idea of return on our investment, and we want to then sequence as much as possible with the highest value to effort ratio. This is called weighted shortest job first sequencing. Okay. Now I have this last bullet point, which is really important. The ratio of value to effort will inform the sequence of the backlog. It will not dictate the sequence of the backlog. Why? Well, you're going to have all kinds of other things get in the way. Dependencies, right? You're going to have government regulations, things that you have to do that aren't valuable, but you have to do them. You're going to have the HIPPO method, highest paid person's opinion, which is not a real good way of sequencing work. You're going to have all kinds of other reasons why you're not going to do them in this exact order. But theoretically, if you did them in this order, you would deliver the most value over the shortest period of time. You see how that works? Pretty simple concept, but it's very, very powerful. That's why this is day 2 stuff. That's why this is day 2, because it's extremely powerful. Here's an example that I did years ago with another group. And this is the value to effort, and then we sequenced it in that manner. Now I might have dependencies because Marilyn was going into the dependency, or Marianne, sorry, not Marilyn. I was going into the dependency thing where I've got to do this before I can do this. Okay, well then I need to sequence this before this because that's a dependency. But if I just did them in the order that delivered the most value over the shortest amount of time, this is what it would look like for one of the groups. It's going to look different for each group, right? Because you have different people doing the work, so they're going to have a different view of the effort, and you have a different people who are going to receive the work, which is the business, who have a different view of value. So there's no right or wrong answer to any of this. This is what the sequence would look like. And here's the thing about this sequence now, is we can start to use these numbers to help us in so many ways. And one of the ways is that we can start using them to open a window. I want to use that verbiage. I can open a window on the future and say, this is what a possible future might be. Notice how I didn't say this is what's going to happen. It's more like a roadmap than a hard and fast plan. This is the sequence within which we're going to take the work. But we know how much effort it takes, and we know how much we can move through the system. We call that velocity. Velocity is just things moving over time. So if I know how many stories I can move through the system, we call these things stories, by the way, or items, PBIs. If I know how many product backlog items I can do every week or every 2 weeks, sprint is 2 weeks, I can start to project into the future what I'm going to be able to deliver to my business. Why is predictability so important? Predictability, not predicting the future, but having the ability to show what the future might be is very, very powerful. That's the hallmark of good business, right? But there's agility in this as well, because what I want you to think about this is as we're moving things through the system, let's say if I have a backlog of 100 items and I move 10 of those items every week, so my velocity is 10 stories per week. How long is it going to take me to get through the 100 items? 10 weeks. And if I put them in absolute sequence, what I'm really showing is I'm showing a roadmap. This is what the future looks like today. I can do these 10 stories next. That's next week. I can do these 10 stories the next week. I can do these 10 stories the next week. So the sequence plus the velocity becomes a schedule. Not in a classic sense, but a schedule of what we're capable of doing as a team over the future. It's a looking into the future. The further we get into the future, the less accurate it is. We know that. Things change. But if we want to change a potential schedule in the future, how do we change that schedule? Well, if sequence plus velocity equals schedule, we're not going to change our ability to move things through the system. Don't get delusional. That's what we do in waterfall. Right? You're not just going to have everybody work 80 hours a week and move more things through the system. It's not the right thing to do. What you're going to do to change the schedule is you're going to have to change the other thing, which is the sequence. And this is how we become agile, because all I need to do to change the schedule is change the sequence. And when I change that sequence, it changes the schedule of what's possible in the future. That's agile. I can change my schedule like that. There's nothing more agile than that. Sound effects. Thank you for my sound effects crew. Anthony, you have your hand up. We'll get to you real quick. Hit me. What do you want?
Just a quick question, and this is more related to dependency, so I can wait. It was just that dependency, as it was, you were saying one thing depends on another. What about people's just general ability to work? Let's say it's a down day for somebody. You just disregard that, or your developers, or
I'm not, but I'm not showing a day. I'm showing, in fact, I'm showing I'm opening up the window on a long-term prognostication of what's capable in the future. You're going to have, you have something called regression to the mean. So your team's going to have an average and a standard deviation, but they're always going to regress to the mean. There's a wonderful story about Israeli fighter pilots where the fighter pilot would have a bad run and the guy and the superior would yell at him, and invariably the next run would be better. And they thought that their yelling actually made a difference, but it didn't. It's just regression to the mean. You're going to have some good days and you're going to have some bad days. So if you have a good day, the odds of you having a bad day afterwards are increased because you're going to regress to whatever your average is. If you have a bad day, you're going to regress to, you're going to move up to the mean.
Okay, thanks.
So it's over time. So what will happen is you'll get a velocity. You also get a standard deviation. I do 10 stories plus or minus 2 every week. Or since we have points now, which are effort, the story, we call them story points, but we have effort. We can measure the effort that moves through because it's a little more accurate because we're talking about the relative size of things moving through. So we can use that as a velocity measure as well, not just the number of stories, but the amount of story points that we complete every sprint, which is a measure of how much do we move through the system. So if we move 10 story points plus or minus 2 through the system, odds are in the next sprint that you're going to move either 8 to 12 points through the system, but over time it's going to be 10 because you're going to regress to the mean. So I can show a longer future, right? This is an example of velocity chart. This is an actual team from God knows how long ago. I can't even remember which company, but what I did is I said, okay, here's our first 8 sprints. In this case, 2-week time frames. We were able to move through 8, 5, 35, 25, 17. Those are story points, not stories, right? Measures of relative effort. You'll notice that I can chart that. Here's the interesting thing about this graph is it looks all the same for new teams, by the way. They always start out at the beginning. When you get a brand new team who's never done Scrum before, the first 2 sprints, you're not going to get much through the system. You know why? They've never done it before. This is also the period of storming, norming, and performing, which is Tuckman's rule, I believe is what it's called. It's going to take them some time to figure out how to get things through the system. They're not used to delivering every 2 weeks. But what will happen is you'll get somewhere along the line, it may stay flat for a while or close to flat for a while, you'll get this big jump. It's like the dam burst. And all the stuff that was stuck now gets through the system. I call that the heartbeat of the team. I know this because I'm a geek when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I've charted many, many teams and they all show this same thing. That's why I'm showing it here. This heartbeat of the team is not real. That's where they got all the stuff that was stuck and they got it through the system. Once you get past the heartbeat of the team, what you'll see is you'll start to see a leveling off. That's when you actually have predictability. That's all I'm saying is you don't have good predictability on a team until you've worked together for a while. This is one of the reasons why you want to keep a team together over a long period of time and bring work to the team. This is why project management is a problem for software development and Scrum. Because if I form a team the first month, which is the first 2 sprints, I'm not delivering much of anything. And then if I split them up every 3 months, I've got a 4-month penalty during the year. Don't split up teams, keep teams together and bring work to their backlog. There's a story of a team that I had down in San Antonio, Texas, where I was a consultant. I used to fly back and forth from San Antonio to Scottsdale, Arizona on a weekly basis. And I taught them this thing. And the person who was one of the biggest skeptics, you always run into skeptics. They didn't believe this stuff works. Anyway, she became a convert. And when I flew, back for the weekend. I used to fly back on like Thursday nights and I worked Monday through Thursday so I could spend, a weekend at home. They had a meeting with their superiors who were going to split up the team. And they said, don't split us up. And they showed them this. They said, if you split us up, you're going to have a month where it's going to take us a while to figure out what we're doing, but just give it to us now. Just keep bringing work to us and don't split us up. We're going to continue to perform at relatively the same level. It was one of the most, when you're proud of a team, I was more proud of that team than probably any other team because they did that in my absence. They made the argument, the same argument that I probably would have made, and they won. And they kept bringing work to the team. And that was a really good team because once you got a team working, the worst thing you can do is split them up. Keep bringing them work, right? So now I can start to use this velocity. The reason I'm getting to this is because this is a stable velocity. I can start using this velocity to actually predict the future. So what I could do with this backlog based on the sequence I have is I could start to look at the effort and say I can do X number of effort and I can start drawing lines or putting in projected sprints. You see how I'm doing that here? I could, if the sequence doesn't change, I probably will deliver this next. And then in sprint 10, I would deliver this. In sprint 11, I would deliver this. This is feedback to my business because the business sees this and says, hold, I want to build the pole sooner because I want to be able to use it in the summer and I can't have it way down here. So what do? They move it up to the top. And when they move that up to the top, what happens to everything else? It moves down. And this protects your developers from just shoving more stuff at them and not giving them more time. Because what you're saying is, this is what we're capable of doing. You as a business decide the order within which we do it because you're deciding the schedule by deciding the sequence. Okay, I think I'm getting through to y'all. Here's another fun thing. Once I have an average and a standard deviation, or I think it's not called an average, but that's nomenclature. I think it's a mean. Once I have the mean and the standard deviation, then I can start to predict the future because I'm assuming it's a somewhat normalized bell-shaped curve where I have so many standard deviations from the mean, I have a certain percentage of data that will fall into that data point. So I can say, if you want to know what can happen over the next quarter, so let's say you want to know what's going to happen over the next quarter. Good. I'll give you probability because that's really what in the complex world it is. It's probability of delivery. It's not absolute. There are no absolutes. It's not going to happen that way. You can live in that world, but it's not going to be too good for you because the fantasy world is not the best place to live. What I can do is I can say that these things in dark green, we're going to give a high probability to. Let's say 87% chance. But that's assuming we don't change anything at all. If we don't change anything, we don't change the team, right? We don't break up the team. We don't change the sequence of the work. We don't change the work itself. We don't add things, et cetera. This is what the future looks like. There's a high probability for these things. There's a little bit, over 50%, maybe a half to 75%. These things, 50-50. This stuff probably not going to get it. And this stuff under here, there ain't no way. In the next 3 months, you're going to get it. So I can start to talk about probability of delivery. I want you to notice another thing about this backlog, because when I'm working with teams, I'm looking at their backlog. And what I'm looking for is I'm saying, does everything in that backlog have value and effort? Because if I do not have value and effort, how the heck do I know where it belongs? Right? So what we do with my teams, and I do this literally in my day job, is we meet on a regular basis. It's part of our cadence, and I'll talk about that when we talk about Scrum. It's part of our cadence to assess any new work with value and effort as quickly as possible and get it in the proper sequence. And every time we add, subtract from this list, every time we change the sequence, we change the schedule, but I can do it like this, right? And then I can start talking about probability of delivery versus absolutes, because delivery is never absolutes. Here's the other thing this helps us with. This is feedback. This is where people get it. This is where people get it wrong. It's not just the predictability part that's important. It's the feedback part that's important. I need to know as a business. I don't know what it's going to take. I don't know how many people are on the business side of things. I used to do website design way back when, right? And I'd have small businesses in the Scottsdale area. I was in Scottsdale, Arizona. They would come to me and they say, Larry, we need a website. That was back when the internet was new and people didn't even have them. Create us a website, Larry. And they didn't know what it cost. They didn't know the effort that it took to create a website. Some things are really, really easy. And some things are really, really difficult. I remember one client came to me and they said, "Oh yeah, you just make it kind of look like Amazon and function like Amazon." I'm like, "Yeah, they got like thousands of developers. It looks easy. It's not easy." So they need that feedback because in their mind they thought, "Oh yeah, Larry's just going to do this over the weekend and we're going to be ready to go." Right? And then there would be something that would be really, really technically very, very simple, like they want a contact form that will email them something, and all I just do is copy and paste it because I wasn't much of a programmer anyway. But it'd take me 5 minutes. But to them, it was magic, and they thought it would cost them a lot of money, and it didn't. So you need to get that feedback immediately to the business because the business has the other side of the equation. They know how much it's worth, but they don't know how much it costs sometimes. And if you can't give them that feedback, what happens, what I've seen, is they'll just take the most valuable stuff and throw it up at the top of the backlog. But that's not the best way to do it. Because if it's valuable and it takes a lot of time, what I'm doing is I'm losing the opportunity cost of delivering all those other things that I could deliver that have maybe a little less value, but I can do really, really quickly. This is why I said, most organizations, they don't pay attention to this. I could double their net profit theoretically in 2 years if they gave me unlimited power, because this is the first thing I'm going to work on throughout the organization is make sure you're doing the right things in the right order. Because I can't tell you the number of companies where I walk in the door, and these are companies you're going to recognize. These are companies that are highly successful in terms of making money. They could make so much more money even because they never talk about value of the work that they do. There's another thing that sequence does for us. In waterfall, you break down everything in detail before you start the work, right? So it's a huge batch. If I got 100 things, I'm going to break down all 100 things before I move that entire batch forward. In Agile, we're moving smaller batches through the system. So we do not go into detail. Notice when we were doing the exercise, by the way, we didn't have a lot of detail on them, but they were still able to put them in the right place. This is the other thing that developers want. They want to know exactly how we're going to do it. You don't need to for relative stuff. But the other thing is you're going to refine the work. You're going to get more detail on the work, but you don't want a bunch of detail on things that are way down at the bottom of the list. It may never happen, right? Because it's way out in the future. Only concentrate and refine the work that's in the near future. And we do go into detail. That's where people get it wrong. It's, Larry, you don't go into detail. Of course we go into detail. We go into detail when it's appropriate, when is important. So this list, this sequence list, and doing this value effort and making sure things are in sequence is the first thing we need to do, because we need to know which stories, which pieces of work we're going to go into detail on. And the sequence is going to determine which things do we go into detail on. So that's a big thing too, because if not, we're wasting time. Because going into detail for something you're not going to do is a waste of time, right? That's a lean principle. Don't waste time. I don't think they say it that way, but close enough. The other thing is tracking the value. Notice how I could track the effort, but I can also start to track the value that the team is doing. Now it's a relative number, but I can see, is the value going up? Is it going down? Am I delivering a high percentage of the potential value or a low percentage of the potential value? Which all of these things tell me are feedback into the system. There's something wrong with the system. If you have all these stories that you could do up at the top, and then you keep moving them down because of dependencies and other things, and you're not delivering, as much value as you could, you've got something wrong in your system. You need to fix it, right? Here's the other thing that value is important to track. Before I get into that, I've got two salespeople. I got one who's really, really lazy, and all he does is he goes out every once in a while and he goes to the golf course and he golfs and he brings along clients and he signs $1 million worth of business. This person just brought $1 million to my organization. I got another person who's a real go-getter who spends 60 hours every week on the phone. At the end of the year, that person booked $1 million worth of sales. I want the guy who can work 4 hours and give me $1 million, not the guy who works 2,000 hours and gives me $1 million. You with me? So why would we measure effort as any kind of measure of productivity or anything else? It means absolutely nothing. and especially in the complex world, means absolutely nothing. If I'm digging ditches, the more hours I put in digging ditches, probably I'm going to dig more ditches. So the effort in a complicated and simple world is tied to the effort we do. In the knowledge-based world, it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference how much effort you put in. It's really how much value do you deliver. And what I'm looking for is I'm going to actually try to pick the one who gives me less effort and more value for that effort. That's return on my investment. So why should I keep measuring things like productivity and velocity in terms of effort? I should start measuring productivity and velocity in terms of value delivered. Here's another thing that's good for. Let's say you're a knowledge worker, and we're going to get into this when we talk about Daniel Pink's book Drive. You are motivated not by money. You're motivated by autonomy, mastery, and purpose. If I tell you every 2 weeks, I give you a report on how much effort you put into something, does that motivate you in any way, shape, or form? Not in the least. But if I show you every 2 weeks the value that you've delivered to your customer, is that motivating to you? Absolutely. Speaks to mastery and purpose. So again, use this really simple relative estimation technique to get at least, you can do it for anything, but get at least value and effort, because in the end, that's really what it's all about, is how much value can we deliver to our customers with the least amount of effort, and try to sequence our backlog that way. And that's why sequence is number one. This is, day one, we had 2 words, complexity, feedback. Day 2, here's the words, value, effort, sequence. Sequence being the most important thing, because when is important. And that's a really tough thing, actually, when you're coming out of the waterfall world to understand, because sequence doesn't matter in the waterfall world. Doesn't matter what order I do things, because I just do everything that's in the bunch. So I can do anything, anytime, doesn't matter. As long as I take everything is done at a certain period of time, I move the whole bunch forward, the whole batch. Different thinking.